Our next author, Asim, is a writer and a musician and an assistant professor of creative writing at Washington University in St. Louis. He has served as a writing director at the African American Policy Forum and a graduate teaching fellow in Columbia University's undergraduate writing program. His work has appeared in Slate, Salon, Guernica, The Baffler, and The New Republic. When he's not writing prose or teaching, he sings and plays bass in Baby Got Back Talk, who were named one of Alternative Press's 17 rising Black alternative bands who are leading the next generation. His book, BOYZ N the VOID, A Mixtape to My Brother, blends music and cultural criticism and personal essay to explore race, gender, class, and sexuality as they pertain to punk rock and straight edge culture. Using punk rock songs on a mixtape to anchor each chapter, the book documents an intergenerational conversation between a millennial and in his 30s and his Generation Z teenage brother. It is an honor to introduce you all to Asim.
Hello, everyone. I'm incredibly stoked to be here today. It's a great honor to speak with you. My name is Jira. I'm a professor and a punk musician and the author of BOYZ N the VOID, a mixtape to my brother. A little over 10 years ago, I entered Earlham College, and the school's first year read at that time was Jonah Lehrer's How We Decide, which some of you might already know is this excellent creative nonfiction book about how our brains, our experiences, and our values influence the choices we make. It was one of the first titles that got me thinking about creative nonfiction as a genre that I personally might be able to contribute to. I admired how Lehrer achieved this seamless mix of reporting, personal essay, research, and cultural criticism. I was at the time what I guess you call a non-traditional student. I got into undergrad a bit late at age 24, and I had taken to the common read assignment with the zeal of someone who was unfamiliar with the norms of the campus environment, right? So I devoured that book, imagining that it was going to be this awesome conversation starter once I got to school, and it would function as some kind of social lubricant, right? Of course, that was not the case, and I didn't end up spending a whole lot of time discussing that book with anyone. As a transfer student, there were lots of other things going on, lots of other subjects that were a bit more scintillating to the people I ran into. But nevertheless, I benefited quite a bit from having kind of missed the memo on how seriously to take that particular common read, because that first year reading experience set me on a path that led to pursuing an MFA in creative nonfiction and eventually becoming an author and English professor. So it's really thrilling to, in a sense, return to BOYZ N the VOID's point of origin, right? To be speaking to you today and to play a part in the very tradition that inspired me in the first place. BOYZ N the VOID emerges out of the synergy between my experiences as a punk rocker and as a professor. I decided to organize the book like a mixtape because a mixtape is so much like a syllabus in structure and intent. In each case, you're inviting someone to have an engagement with a series of pieces of culture in a specific sequence. And you're imparting a message using those pieces of culture and the reactions they might induce in your audience. If any of you are familiar with the novel or the movie High Fidelity, you might recall Rob Gordon, right? Saying that in the case of a mixtape, you're using someone else's poetry to communicate a feeling or an idea, which is a subtle art. Each chapter in my book is centered on a song for this reason. I started writing the book after hitting a certain point in my late 20s and thinking, how weird. The cliches suggest that I should have aged out of this and moved on, but I'm still a punk rocker. And I wonder why that is. And I began to write towards examining whether the tenets of that subculture and straight edge, which is of course related to punk, Whether the attendance meant as much as my younger self would have imagined, or if going to shows and playing in bands and making zines was ultimately just a force of habit. I began to form chapters around songs that represented some of my philosophical linchpins, or songs that I associated with formative moments where my place in the world came into clearer view. I realized that if I was to narrate what punk and straight edge have meant and continued to mean to me up to that point, my youngest brother, Jossie, was an ideal audience. The book shares some aims with first-year common read programs. Mixtapes and syllabi and common reads all proceed from a similar premise, namely that collective care isn't merely about looking at one another, but looking outward together in the same direction. BOYZ N THE VOID is about facilitating intergenerational conversation. Jossie and I are 14 years apart in age, which is a gap that could make us parent and child, right? Even the title of the book is sort of playing on the seminal John Singleton film, Boys in the Hood, where the main characters, Trey and Furious, who are father and son, are actually a similar gap to Jossie and I. But my relationship with my brother is a lot more side by side than that. I wanted to take advantage of the particular rhetorical affordances of having a rapport with someone much younger. So much of being Black, and perhaps of growing up in general, involves a kind of preemptive scolding masquerading as necessary tough love. I wanted to find a way to share life lessons with my brother without making him feel lectured or condescended to. And speaking of looking outward together in the same direction, my brother Jossie acts as my scene partner in the book. So although the mixtape is addressed to him, we communicate to one another on the page the way two actors in a scene, might talk on stage. So while we primarily would address one another in the book, we do what they call cheating out in the theater world, right? It's where you angle your body and make sure your voice is carried so that the audience can follow the conversation happening on stage as well. It's a way of keeping the barrier between the world of the stage, in this case, the world of the page, right, and the world we live in permeable, so that the action is both true to the story and accessible to those watching it unfold. You might ask, well, what does that actually mean for readers? It means that you don't need to know anything about punk rock, straight edge, or odd, artsy Black boys to follow along to the mixtape. In keeping with the democratic spirit of punk, there's something for everyone. It's a guided tour of the music and the subculture that will resonate with people from all walks of life. One more element of BOYZ N THE VOID that I'd like to lift up is the component that explores how growing up punk informed how I think about gender, and how bands from Bikini Kill to Bad Cop to Big Joni helped me to embrace feminist politics. Black men are constantly reminded that they're oppressed, but we're less often advised on how not to be oppressive to others and how to be in solidarity with women, and Black women especially. So I wondered, what would Black experience look like if a gender-focused variant of the talk was administered to Black kids with the same regularity and gravity as the version that centers on how not to get shot by cops? The exchange between my brother and I in BOYZ N THE VOID provides a possible point of entry for that conversation. Finally, BOYZ N THE VOID's commentary on difference is balm for balkanized times. The mixtape reveals how two seemingly dissimilar things, punk rock and Blackness, actually share a secret kinship. The story is about the specific convergence of otherness that is chosen and otherness that is socially imposed. I like to call it putting the alt in alterity. Alt, of course, is this abbreviation for alternative, as in alternative rock music or alternative values. And alterity is the state of being a political or social minority. Being a Black person who uses punk culture as a compass for navigating life naturally combines the two. I wish you all the luck and discernment as you mull this fantastic array of choices for what books will shape the future's best minds. And of course, I invite you to keep in mind, you never know which void dwellers out there that you might inspire next. Thanks a lot for listening.